Hello and welcome to the Turn 4 podcast. I am your host, Dan Maldonado. If this is your first time listening, welcome. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. This podcast comes from two lifelong fans of IndyCar and other forms of motorsport. Before we get started, I got to introduce you to my co-host, the combo-loving Tim Reiner. Hey, Timmy.
Hello, Dan. How are you?
I'm well. You know, I've never been a fan of combos.
I didn't even know you saw what I was eating, but yes, it's
my
from the airport, actually.
go-to salty snack, of course, is popcorn, as we've noted on this here popcorn.
It's the pizza baked pretzel, pizzeria.
There you go. Good job. Delicious, I'm sure.
Not too bad. It's one of our travel snacks for sure. And I was going through the airport yesterday, as you know, but yeah, so I picked that up. That was my dinner, and it has turned into more food today. So
yeah,
just continues to go on.
I had one cookie at the Delta Club on my way home from my travel this week.
Yeah. When was that? Yesterday?
No, 2 days ago. I got home
2 days ago.
Wednesday late. Yep, because the storms in Orlando.
Yeah.
Tim, this is the Championship Review podcast number 81.
Wow, 81. And I can't believe the season's over.
I know. What a drag. But you know what? We've got other things that we can talk about, which will,
for sure.
We'll carry it on every week. So in that review, I can't think of a better place to start than to compare our predictions to the actual results. And I think just kicking off where we're at in terms of the top three, which to me was interesting when we revealed these, and we don't reveal them to each other. We don't coordinate. We don't discuss any of it until we're putting it out on the show, which we did before the season, of course. So you and I both picked Newgarden to win, McLaughlin second, and Palou third.
Yeah, just randomly, right? That was one of those things that when we looked at it, we had the same picks for the top three, which is really bizarre.
And for the most part, right, 7 through 9 is about the same. I think, where we really went went off in our own direction was number 10, but we'll get there. We'll get there because the reality of this top three was looking really good for a good portion of this season. Especially when you focus on Newgarden and Palou. And we've talked a lot this season, especially this sort of final stretch of the season and what happened with Newgarden here, especially after Gateway. But let's focus on the positives for Newgarden for 1 second. He had 4 wins, did not have any poles, 8 top 5s, 11 top 10s. 11 top 10s means he finished outside the top 10 in 7 races, or 35% of the time. Really not that big a deal, right? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a big deal.
Big deal. But when you dive into it, I think this is really where it went south for him because his bads were really, really bad. St. Pete, 17th. Barber, 15th. Mid-Ohio, the best of the bads at 12th. Indy GP2, 25th. St. Louis, 25th. And Laguna 21st, right? So when you look at how Joseph Newgarden's year finished, the bad was really bad. And the fact that he had no poles means, he had to kind of drive through some traffic and had to be a little bit more strategic. And here's the thing. I realize it's unusual. We're starting off with the 5th place guy, right, in the championship. But the results within the top 5, I believe, all kind of spoke off of Newgarden. They kind of hinge off of Newgarden's finish here. And the reason why I say that is because he has a teammate in McLaughlin who finished 3rd, and he had a rival in a Chevy with no wins who finished 4th.
Yeah.
So we've talked about this before. I mean, total disaster, or he made the best of it?
No, total disaster, from my opinion. He totally fell off, especially the last 3 races, the last 3 that you mentioned there. He just being in the 20s, not acceptable, right? You're in a position to go for the championship, or you're in a position to battle for second in the championship, let's face it, at that point. And then everything just goes off the rails. I don't know if it's a lack of concentration, just overdoing it, just being in a situation that you think you got to catch up. Again, you mentioned no poles. You got to catch up, or you get behind at the beginning of the race. You don't have good qualifications, and you overcook the car, in my opinion, and you
Yeah.
make silly mistakes.
Yeah. So with that said, I got a new question for you because we've talked a little bit about Chip Ganassi Racing being the best team in IndyCar. There's a difference, right? So I was listening to a podcast earlier this week, and it really got me thinking. Chip Ganassi Racing, I would say, and I think you agree, is the best team in IndyCar in 2023. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah.
But would you also call them the fastest team in IndyCar?
If Palou's behind the wheel, yes, I would. Everybody else, no, but most consistent.
Right. Without a
Drivers
doubt.
just make smart decisions.
And I think that's really what keeps that train moving, right? On the tracks as hard as they run. Toward points and finishes and consistency. I think that's really where that is. They have one pole this season. It's
Oh,
Indianapolis.
interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So not the fastest team this year, that's for sure, right? The best team,
Yeah.
without a doubt. Best strategy, best strategist, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And
Two of the
best
smartest
mindset to
guys.
say you take what you can take, right?
Yep.
I think it's a mindset thing that
Yeah.
this is what we're going to do and this is what we can bring in. It's got to be preached within the trailer to say this is our strategy going in, or within corporate office. And here's how we're going to work, the Indy 500, number one. And number two, this is how we're going to work the season, and how we're going to go towards a championship and winning a championship.
Right. Which all leads back to Newgarden. He didn't, I'm sure he did, but his mindset, and you can't teach that, right? So that's kind of what you want in your star driver is the aggression. You need that aggression. You don't want somebody that you need to constantly be kind of motivating in there, especially at this level, right? You wouldn't think that somebody at this level would need extra motivation when it comes to that. But I think part of that failure toward the end of the season for Newgarden, coming in fifth, is that over aggression, right? Not taking what the car was giving them in qualifying. They weren't great in qualifying. Willpower, no poles, right? So,
Yeah.
so
I
not
think you
great in
teach how
qualifying.
to dial it back, right? If you don't have the
And
perfect
that's the
car.
thing. I don't
Yeah.
think that they are, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think what they're still looking at is we can overcome this with some strategy, and maybe if Joseph's not trusting the strategy or doesn't feel 100% behind the strategy, that leads to an over aggression.
Yeah.
And that leads to big mistake in Portland qualifying, right? Big mistake at St. Louis, which, let's face it, the entire IndyCar community expected him to win at St. Louis.
Yeah. Well, he dominated the other ovals, as we know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Except Indy, he didn't dominate, but he won it. So when you look at that, you go, the expectation going in is to, win that race for the how many consecutive time. And so you get behind in that strategy and you throw it away, as we spoke in other podcasts. So how do you manage that on a circuit like that? And then how do you not fall apart the rest of the season, right? You just
Right.
threw it away, which is
Yeah.
unlike Newgarden, in my opinion. I don't think that's unlike Penske, in my opinion, too. You don't throw races away. You take what you can and move forward. And I'm not saying he's wrecking a bunch of cars, but Penske doesn't like drivers that wreck cars and they move on quickly. I'm not saying Newgarden's going anywhere. I just think you got to sort of set the expectation going into 2024. And I think he's still going to be a favorite. I think everybody knows he
ovals.
still has it. Yeah, he's going to be a favorite in ovals, and he just needs to get the street courses as well as the road courses under him and make sure that he's taking what he can get.
Right. With all that as the backdrop, then you take a look at Scott McLaughlin, I think, who was certainly more consistent. One race win, two poles, 7 top fives, 14 top tens, which means he only finished outside the top 10 three times. And it was St. Pete, which was 13, and he had the crash with Grosjean. 16th at Indy GP1, and then 14th at the Indy 500. So McLaughlin's bads were not that bad, which is how a guy with one race win beats his teammate by 2 places who has 4 wins.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And McLaughlin was on record sort of shamelessly saying he wanted to be the top finishing Penske driver for 2023. Given Newgarden's position for much of the year, his win total, etc., right? We talked about that. I think that's a pretty bold statement, Tim, right? If you put yourself in Scott McLaughlin's shoes for a minute, what do you think McLaughlin sees or saw within the team that made him feel like he could make that statement in public? I want to be the best finishing Penske driver.
For me, it's just the competitive nature of drivers, and whether you vocalize it or not, you always want to be the best. And if you're running the same equipment and on the same team, that's just the nature of the beast. And it's
You always
amazing to
want to be your
think.
teammate, but you don't always see or hear these guys putting it out there.
Yeah, I think they're really close, though. I don't think it's not a knock or I don't think it's any way going to harm their relationship. So I think at the end of the day, it's just a matter of the competitive spirit, and having that competitive spirit is what drives some of those uh, things that you want to say. And I don't think Scott is the normal mold for a typical Penske driver, in my opinion. He's very vocal, but he's good with fans. I think he's probably one of the most popular drivers in the series, and he brings a huge following over. So for him to make statements like that, I don't think it's detrimental to the team, or I don't think it's going to hurt their relationship at all. I know you
Right.
feel differently though.
I do. I think if McLaughlin continues to beat Joseph on a more regular basis, he gets down the ovals. I think that that's going to cause some problems because I think that Joseph views himself as the team lead, of the three drivers, even though Power has, the tenure over all of them, of course.
Hmm.
But Joseph is not going anywhere anytime soon. Not to say that I think Power is, but Power certainly is in the final few chapters of his career here.
Yeah, for sure.
McLaughlin also has, I think, a tall or a long runway in front of him as well, staying within this team if he continues to post results, and he is posting results.
Hmm.
I think McLaughlin is a little bit smarter driver. I think in most cases, his aggression is not getting the best of him, which I think is what Joseph's problem here is in some of these cases. I think McLaughlin is definitely a little smarter driver than that. I think he's fast, multiple championships in where he came from in supercars, so he knows how to do it.
Hmm.
He
Yeah.
knows how to do that. So, and Joseph should know how to do that too. But he's been the bridesmaid now for the past however many years since he won his last championship. So
Yeah.
so Newgarden
And
can
there
take
could
a
have been
little
a
bit.
lot more pressure on Newgarden coming into the season. I think he was the
Mhm.
pick by most people to win the championship this year. I don't think people thought Palou and Ganassi would, rekindle what they had in
Oh yeah, yeah. I agree with
20
you there.
2020. So, or I should say 2021. So I think it's one of those situations where you put all that pressure on yourself. You told yourself it's either championship or bust. Obviously, winning Indy is a nice thing to have in your back pocket, but I think the expectation coming in is that. So I think next year coming in with the expectation probably being sort of that, but not maybe the front runner of everybody's pick to go. Newgarden's going to win this. It's for him to lose. Takes a little bit of that pressure off and just lets him relax in some of those situations where you're working from back in the field and trying to just get a good finish for the team.
Right. Fourth place goes to Pato O'Ward. No wins, no polls, 9 top fives. Bless you. And 14 top tens. So equal top tens to McLaughlin, but I think it's McLaughlin's single win that that puts him ahead of Pato O'Ward. He had 17th. O'Ward did at 17th at Long Beach with a crazy move against Scott Dixon, which afterward he was indignant about. 24th place at Indy with a crash after dive bombing Ericsson, and 26th in Detroit with contact, which frankly I don't remember. We were there, but um, I am surprised that O'Ward didn't get any wins. I'm surprised he didn't get any polls. All right, do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I'm surprised the whole team didn't have any wins, right? So that really surprises me overall. For award, you would think he's the front runner there, right? So if the team doesn't get it, you obviously that means award didn't. So he would be the guy that you would think would have a win. So yes, the answer is, I believe it's a little surprising that he didn't get a win this year. You sort of throw this over to growing pains with adding a third car.
Yeah, you
I'm
don't.
not sure if that's the case. They didn't have the packages to come up in first. They should have won. We can all say they should have won the season opener and didn't in St. Pete. So yeah, it's a little surprising. I do remember the crash in Detroit, where coming out of the last corner, going on the front stretch, tried to make a dive bomb move and hit the wall, and was like, oh well, we'll just move on. So for him to finish in front of Newgarden, I think what you're looking at is the 14 top tens, right? And,
Yeah,
but his bads were bad, right? 17th, 24th, and 26th.
yeah.
Those
His
are
bads
not
were bad.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, his bads were bad. Nowhere near as good as McLaughlin's bads, right? But nowhere as bad as Newgarden, and that's kind of what got him there. No
Yeah.
bulls.
Newgarden just had more
Yeah.
bads. We'll call it
Yep.
that way. More
Yeah,
bads.
really bads. To overcome 4 wins, that's the shocker, right? Like, how do you add enough negative to your season total to kill 4 wins? That's what the the $1 million question there is. But that's when you take a look at it, that's our third, fourth, and fifth place. Because for me, I'm grouping in Ganassi first and second, Palou and Dixon. With their run at this championship, and I mean, Brian on Twitter puts out a poll right before Dixon had his win, saying, "Do you think that Scott Dixon is going to get a win this year?" I did vote yes. I think most did, but there were still a number of no's there.
Yeah.
And once that poll went out, then Dixon went on his win streak, right, picking up 3 wins on the season, locked in that second place ahead of Joseph, which was amazing. And I think what might have backed Dixon out of it a little bit, obviously, was the win total. But the second piece was he's 27th place at Long Beach.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you take that out, his worst finish is 7th at Barber, which is one better than Palou's worst finish this season at 8th place at St. Pete. But Palou doesn't have a 27th in his bag. Here's the deal: outside of these 2 races, these 2 drivers, Palou and Dixon, were always somewhere near each other in each of these races. They were never far from each other. So if Palou's out there winning and he is the pull for the 500, but if Palou's out there winning and finishing just ahead or somewhere within Dixon was never able to gain on him. He had to outscore him by double digits in order to keep it super close, toward the end of this season. So it really became a game of second place. Everybody was racing for second place. Couple of questions for you on this thing, Timmy. First, Dixon, does he have another championship in him before he decides to retire, whenever that may be?
If Palou's his teammate, I do not think so. I think Palou is a level above just about everybody on the grid. He had a great season, as everybody knows, and went on that run of wins. He doesn't make mistakes. He's fast and doesn't make mistakes, which is key to winning a championship, and this year winning it by a landslide, in my opinion. And so it's going to be tough. I don't think, given the same car, the same circumstances at the track, I don't think Scott's going to be quicker than Palou, mano a mano, if you will. I just think when you bring young blood like that in, that's really good and has the same mentality as Dixon and the same consistency as Dixon, it's going to be tough to do. Again, Dixon went on his own run, right? Some of that was strategy.
All of it was strategy. His wins were all strategy.
Yeah, so they're all strategy. It's not raw speed. So I find it hard to happen. Could Palou trip up here and there, and maybe, but I don't see it happening with Palou being on the same team.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you there. Um, we'll talk about it in the grid walk, but it's interesting because now that team's going to be 5 entries.
Are
So
you feeling there's going to be growing pains, Dan?
I do. And I feel like somebody's going to suffer there, right? Like at some point, somebody's going to suffer there. Engineering wise, I don't worry about that team, from that perspective, but we saw a couple of high profile, you know, mistakes in pits with the Marcuses back to
Mm-hmm.
back races.
Yeah.
So, at that point, you're hiring crew who may or may not be, the best crew available, but they're the best. They're just available, right? In
Yeah.
some of those cases. And that could help, push some of those other teams in a little bit different direction. I don't see them taking apart Dixon's team or Palou's team, in terms of their over the wall guys or anything like that. I certainly don't see that happening. But it could have a downstream effect on the rest of the team, where you're diverting resources, training resources, helping and you're moving some things in a different direction. 5 cars. This
It's a
isn't this
lot.
isn't the
That's
IndyCar of 10 years ago where they were trying to fill grids and, Andretti team was putting 5, 6, 7 cars at Indy and, things like that. But this is going to be a different story. If anybody can do it, I think this is the team that can. But even with that said, I think it's going to be extremely difficult for them. Let me ask you another question. You think Palou repeats next year? I just got done saying everything I just got done saying. But let me ask you this. Do you think Palou repeats next year?
He's got to be the favorite. Do I think he can do it? Yes. Do I think that it's going to be a closer competition than it was this year? I would imagine so. Uh, to your point with some of the growing pains that could happen, but I agree with you that they're not going to touch Dixon's team and they're not going to touch Palou's team. They're going to keep them sort of the way they are. And I think the rest are going to have to figure out what makes sense from a going over the pit wall and not making mistakes. So yeah, I think he can definitely win it. I think coming off of last year where he finished well in a turmoil season, I think there were people wondering, could they turn it around in 2023, and they totally did. So I don't know how you beat the guy, right?
Right. Do you remember the last time somebody repeated? Went back to
Mm,
back in IndyCar
I
championship?
don't.
Let me give you multiple choice.
Sure.
Scott
Let's do it.
Dixon, Dario Franchitti, or Sam Hornish?
I'm going to say Dario.
Right. Nice job, Timmy. 9, 10, and 11. Dario
Yeah.
Franchitti. Repeat. Back to back to back.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Thank you to Spencer Neff for that little nugget. I just text Spencer because I was too lazy to look it up, but we appreciate Spencer at IndyCar1909.com for that little fact check there. Good job on that one, Timmy. I really thought I'd get you. I thought you were going to pick Hornish. That's why I threw Hornish down.
Well, it was kind of an oddball selection, and I was like, I'm not sure I was watching so much back in those days, so I had to sort of figure out. I was like,
Yeah.
And then Dario seems like a legend in his own right, so I had to choose him.
He has a... Can I go on a tangent for a second? You mentioned
Absolutely.
the L word there. So during the Laguna Seca broadcast, Lee Diffie called Ryan Hunter-Reay a legend of motorsports. Agree or disagree?
I don't agree on that one, and I know you don't either.
Yeah,
So
totally. Okay. I was
yeah,
waiting for you to say
so we're on the
I
same
was going to
page.
pull out the wrong if you tried to tell me that he was, because it was, and we were going to ruin the rest of the show.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go on and on.
Yeah. I did ask somebody, I did text, I don't want to put them on the spot. I did text somebody about that and they agreed, right? Oh, was he good? Yeah. Legend?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not
Talk
just
about
me.
that off air.
Yeah. Palou, back to Dixon and Palou. Palou was 160 points, 168 points ahead of third place McLaughlin. Dixon was 90 points ahead of McLaughlin. We've anointed Chip Ganassi the best team. We talked about, or top team. What do you think Penske, Arrow McLaren, and Andretti have to do next year to knock them off this perch? Here's the other thing about this change. Before you answer, hybrid. It's going to change the weight distribution of the car along with a revised aero screen, which is also going to change the weight distribution of this car. There's a lot that's coming into this thing. With all that said, Ganassi is the team to beat. And you got Penske, McLaren, and Andretti for next year. What do you think they got to do?
I think you just got to limit mistakes. I think that's the biggest thing. If you limit mistakes and you have a run um, like Dixon, and the run I'm talking about is that his worst finish was 7th. If you take out Long Beach, you got to just be up front and you got to be consistent. And I think that's the main thing. You got to stay on, I would say, the most popular strategy, or the one that looks the best, because strategy got a few people out this year. And if you do that, and you need to have a good environment internally and the drivers working together. So if you've got that cohesiveness inside, that'll sort of give you results and make you a top runner. So it's not going to be easy. I think with all the engineering and intel that Ganassi is going to have with 5 cars, it's going to be tough to beat. I think Roger has always thought that 3 cars is, the max for a team to keep them together. So could a 5th car crumble the dynamic? It absolutely could.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
We've seen Andretti go to 4 cars and it doesn't seem to
Have
always
been
work.
at 4 cars, right? Like it always seemed like in that they were 75% cohesive, right? There was always one outlier in that group. At least since it was like what Kanan and Dario and Brian Herta and Marco. I think since then, right? That's probably the last time they had four drivers that were all a good cohesive unit, I would say.
Yeah.
Because regardless of what it looked like earlier this year, I think the wheels came off of that thing at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
With all this kumbaya in the beginning of the year with Grosjean and Kirkwood and Herta and Devlin and all that. And then I think after a while it just kind of went south.
Yeah, and how do you keep 5 cars up, right? So I think you're going to have a Ganassi car potentially running in the back, just because it's just odds. It's just odds, right? How do you have all 5 up in the top 10 on a regular basis? The other thing you got to think about is, how does this other 5th car take points away from your competitors, right? And does that play into you being able to win the championship as well?
Strategy somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, there's some mathematician going, well, if you add this car, you take this many points away from your competitors on an average basis. So you still need to perform well, but maybe not as well as if you just have 4 cars.
Yeah.
Or 2 cars or 3 cars, whatever it might be.
So that's 1 through 5. Palou, Dixon, McLaughlin, Award, Newgarden. We had 3 out of those we had 3 out of those correct. I mean, in various places. I did not have Award in my top 5. Neither did you. We didn't have the 6th place guy in our top 5 either. And 6th place went to Marcus Ericsson. Marcus Ericsson finishes 6th, 1 win, 4 top 5s, 14 top 10s. You want to talk about consistency. He moves on to Andretti next year. We talked about what Andretti needs to do next year. Maybe they are going to 3-car team instead of the 4. Early prediction, Tim? Marcus get a win at Andretti next year?
No, I don't see that happening at all.
Really?
Yeah. No, I
so
don't
then
think.
My next question then.
You had Kirkwood was the only driver who got a win. Got 2.
Yeah.
I know next year is not this year, but I would think others on that team would, like a Herta, would get a win before Ericsson. I think Ericsson's very consistent. He's not going to throw the car away, but he was at a team where the car was never bad, in my opinion, off, right? You weren't battling a car that didn't handle well.
Yeah.
I think you're going to get a different feeling at Andretti. But it's what Ericsson wanted. He wanted to be on a team that was going to pay him, and he wanted a team that he felt like wanted him. And so you make the move. I don't think it's a lateral move. I think you took a step or 2 down to go to Andretti. Not saying they're a bad organization. I just think from what we're looking at right now, it's just Chip Ganassi Racing is the team to be with. So
let me ask you then, and I think I know the answer to this. Does he finish at least 6th place next year in the championship?
No.
Or do you think worse?
No.
Right? Over or under, right?
Worse.
You think it's under? Is he in the top 10?
No, I don't think so. You had him out of the top 10 this year. I didn't have him in
there. Yeah, you had him in there. Yeah. Did not.
If you figure, how does this play out, right? The top finisher in Andretti this year was Herta. in
through the skin
10th.
of his teeth. 4
Yeah, and
points,
his teammate Kirkwood, I think you had
2
mentioned
wins.
before,
Yep.
was 11th. So
Yeah.
do I think Ericsson takes it? And so what you're asking, does Ericsson lead the team and he's the highest finisher on Andretti? I don't think so.
Hmm. Interesting. I can't wait for the season preview now. Um, Power finishes 7th place. I had Power in 6th. You predicted he would finish one spot better in 5th.
Hmm.
You expected better, as did I to a degree. But take that aside for a minute. Was this kind of a dud in terms of a championship defense for Will Power?
I think it's just a hangover after coming from, winning the championship the way he did and being the new power, we'll call him, just very low key and just does his thing. Um, yeah, I think it's definitely disappointing. I don't think he's happy at all with the season outcome, and he lost his winning streak for a number of seasons. I think he was going for 16th or 17th seasons in a row. So yeah, I think on that front, it's definitely a bummer. And then, you know, well, granted though, finishing where you did in the championship isn't terrible, but it's not great.
Yeah. I misspoke earlier when I said no polls. Will Power 2 polls, 6 top 10s, 11 or 6 top 5s, 11 top 10s. So 6 races outside the top 10, and that's likely what sunk his chance. I don't. To me, I think of
I think no wins, right? He's used to winning.
right at least one.
Yeah. Last year was just
Um,
one when he won the
that's it.
championship, but
Yeah,
he built around that. This year, yeah, just had some
super
offs and
consistent.
some
Yeah,
some stuff that wasn't normal for Power, I would say, from what I've seen in the past.
yeah. Interesting. I mean, he does have. We think he's got 2 more years left on that deal. 24, 25. It's funny how you judge drivers, right, based on their past performance, where you feel like 7th place for Will Power, it's kind of a bummer, right?
Hmm.
And it's really not. I mean, I don't think you get you have 3 Ganassi guys who are going to be in that top 10. You at least have 2 Arrow McLarens. You at least have 2 Andretti's. They're more than capable of being in the top 10, right?
Yeah, it's very tight.
That's 7 right there.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like that's not bad. I don't think 7th place is all that bad. Did I expect a little bit better? Yeah. Did I expect a repeat? No. I expected a couple 3 polls. I did expect at least one win.
You were
Um,
expecting a sixth.
yeah, yeah, a little higher. Yeah, a little
One
higher.
little higher.
Yeah, a little higher. I mean, Erickson right there, 14 top 10s. Will Power, 11. There's your difference,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's your difference. Moving on. Um, 8th through 10th, 8, 9, and 10. I think it's easy to label this section, this little triumvirate of drivers, the shockers, because I don't think we would have predicted this 8th through 10th. Do you agree?
I think there's only one that I'm shocked about. The other two don't surprise me.
And the shock is, of course, Christian Lundgaard, right? Finishing 8th
Yeah.
place,
Yeah. I think that's the
taking
one that I
a
didn't
win
have anywhere.
and 2 poles,
I know. It's
right?
impressive.
Which is unreal. Here's the thing: going into Detroit, that team was in need of like, we're going to blow it all up, right? Like they could not figure anything out. Graham crashed under yellow. We know that later on, Harvey crashed under yellow somewhere. I can't remember where, but um, that happened. That team was a mess. They were right fighting for the last row amongst each other at Indianapolis. They weren't really good anywhere. I mean, he had some sparkles right at Indy GP when we were there, but we expected that because he had been good with it the first time he ever driven an IndyCar. So we were kind of okay
Hmm.
with that, but that car fell apart at
Yep.
that point, which is, again, we also expected that because we didn't think that, RLL had that level of engineering depth, that was going to be able to bring him throughout that race. But yeah, I mean, shock to me. 8th
Yeah,
place.
especially how they
Yep.
started. If you would have said after Indy that you're going to finish 8th in the championship. You're going to get 2 wins and 2 poles and all that other stuff. He might have had a pole already. He had the 1
Yeah.
pole, but you're going to get 2 wins. People would have been laughing at you. So whatever they blew up, they did it the right way. It seemed
Mhm.
they were able to bring in the right personnel to turn around the car, because you had Rahal, who, had some good moments as well. So, yeah, I'm surprised by Lundgaard being up there, but
Be still my heart. You just said something nice about Graham.
oh,
My God.
every once in a while, I don't hate anybody. I like them all. Sometimes they just disappoint me. So,
Yeah.
but Rossi being where he was doesn't surprise me, finishing 9th, and then you got Herta in 10th is a little bit of surprise. I think more of a surprise for you. I think you have these folks. Well, you picked Rossi where Rossi finished, so
Yeah.
you sort of had that down.
Yeah. 9th place for Rossi. You had Rossi 8th.
Yeah,
You and I both, though, had Herta higher. I had Herta way higher, 4th place. You had Herta 7th.
7th. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. So let me go back to Lundgaard real quick. So clearly he was the class of the RLL stable. Probably what led to the early dismissal of Jack Harvey, because they wanted to get a head start on evaluating drivers for that car. And even when the team started to turn around, it still felt like Jack was lagging. So Lundgaard had a good year, Tim. I'll give you that one. But here's what I want to ask you, because I've seen it a couple of times on Twitter recently. Lundgaard championship potential. I think we feel. Do you think he's got some championship potential? The man.
Potentially, yeah. I think you
Okay.
got to work on your oval racing,
Mm-hmm.
but from a road course, maybe even a street course, definitely a road course. But there were more and more road courses for sure. I think it's going to take a little bit of time, but I think overall, yeah, he's got the potential. He's no slouch.
But not. But would you say not with RLL?
That's TBD. I think they could make. I think they're going out of the season feeling good and confident, but they need to work all off season to come out next season and
New car
perform
next year.
well.
In a
I
way,
know,
new car next year.
which is going to be difficult for them. But I think,
Mm-hmm.
didn't we hear they went back to some very basic setups from
Yep.
many years ago to sort of right the ship, at least get it started? And so I think you got to go off of still what worked and not overanalyze. And maybe that's what the team does. They overanalyze some of the data and it puts them in a bad spot.
Yeah.
So I think it could happen with the team. Could it happen next year with the team? I doubt it.
Yeah. We'll see.
I wouldn't bet on that
you
one
know,
by any means.
right. Because my level of confidence that they will pull something out, given the new drivetrain, the new weight distribution, and things that are going to change with that car next year, makes me a little concerned that maybe they will continue to be just a little behind the rest of the teams, specifically Andretti, Ganassi, of the other Honda teams. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to continue to struggle. Alexander Rossi, 9th place. Why is this a shocker? Especially since I had Rossi finishing 9th and you had him in 8th. And I'm going to change the word that I have here in the notes. I think he was largely anonymous this season.
Yeah, I
Would you
think you're
agree
right.
with that?
Yeah, it wasn't. He was kind of in the background, just.
Even when he ran well, we did not seem to have much in the way of focus on him.
Mm-mm.
He ran really well at Portland. He had some problems there toward the end of that race, but if you look at like the Portland race and you look at where he kind of how he raced, he had a decent race, but it was completely anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And it's kind of his whole season, right?
I would agree with that. The focus is, and it's going to be on Pato Award there, and then Felix had some moments that I think pulled some of that spotlight onto Felix. Felix just never converted, his 2 poles. You said that we were at Indy. He was like, he's going to fall right back. He's going to
He
do
was
right back.
5th by lap 3 or whatever it was.
Yeah,
It's just the way it goes with him.
yeah. But yeah, I would say it's just largely anonymous. I think they had some moments toward the back half of this season, which means they're getting it together. And next year really should be the one where there's no excuse at this point. He should be competing further up the grid. He should be competing for poles. He should be competing for championships. Here's the thing. I heard Alexander on his own podcast talk about the weight distribution that is going to come with the hybrid unit. It's going to move some of that weight distribution toward the back. And apparently that's where he likes it. He likes that in the car. So it's more suitable to his own driving style. So potentially there's something, I don't want to say an advantage, but there's something there that helps him. But really, you're going to have to count on a team that is more and more structuring themselves like an F1 team to be able to do that for Alexander. Because in F1, we set it up to go fast based on the numbers, go drive it fast.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're not doing that, they're
not to your liking, right?
Yeah, then he isn't going to be fast. And Malukas, I think Malukas is the wild card there. No idea what to expect. Everyone's like, "Oh, he's an oval master." No, he's not. He had two good races on the same track back to back. Big deal. Right? Yeah. Big deal.
Yeah, that's true.
So
he's young, fun. I think he's going to add some character to the team. He's going to fit in sure.
Great, right? He's going to do all those goofy videos and everything, and he'll be totally fine. And he's a good person. We saw him in Detroit, right? We liked his personality. We like the whole persona. Yeah, I give you that one. In terms of expectations, I have no idea. I really don't.
Do you expect him to do better than Felix in that car, or about the same, or what is your?
I actually feel like he's just going to do about the same.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't see him being a real juggernaut. I really don't. So, obviously, I think one consolation for Rossi before we move on is that he did finish ahead of his former teammate and Andretti Autosport leader Colton Herta, who finished 10th. And he finished ahead of Kirkwood, who finished 11th, who is now in the seat formerly occupied by Mr. Alexander Rossi.
And his best friend, Grosjean.
Yeah, Grosjean. Who they became BFFs. I think the biggest surprise here for me, shocker, right? Because that's the thing we're going along with 8, 9, and 10. The biggest shocker here for me, Tim, is Herta. I think expectations have been super high on Colton Herta the past couple of seasons. And as he looks to be the top choice for Andretti Global, if and when they're approved to go to put, cars on the F1 grid at some point in the next couple of years, doesn't yet have a super license.
Yeah.
Which means they're going to have to figure something out.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have to put him in some of the lower FIA series that, earns him points fast, or you're going to have to talk to him about third place or higher in this championship is your goal, pal.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think, to me, Colton is certainly talented. I think that's without question. I don't think anybody, questions his talent behind the wheel, but I think his confidence is quickly shaken when asked to carry a car that might be less than perfect. And I think we've seen several examples this year, where with tires dropping off and he's quick to call in and say, "Hey, I can't drive, right? Tires are going off. Tires are going off. Tires are going off for Palou," and he's saying, "How many more laps do you need me to get?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
And maybe not overdriving it when the tires are really good to make them last longer than they should, or maybe the setup's better. And so therefore the setup sort of helps that situation too. I think it's a little bit of everything when it comes into that. It's not just the driver and how they're driving it, but it's also how that car is set up and is it built to sustain tires longer. But you're right. He does call in very quickly and says, "I can't drive this thing anymore. Bring it. I need to bring it in." And they bring it in early and they get off strategy.
And maybe that's the reason why they moved his dad to Kirkwood and they put Rob Edwards on his pit stand, because maybe somebody I'm making huge leaps of judgment. I have one of these things in a podcast, so I can do that. The deal is this. Maybe somebody along the line said, it's his dad on the pit stand. Do you think his dad's going to listen to him whine and complain that for too long? Like maybe they felt like maybe Brian was just a little too accommodating.
Yeah, but I think if you put the results together, what he did with his dad versus what he's doing now, I think his record's much better. So
And his dad getting 2 wins,
I
one of them
know.
completely on strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Speaking of that guy, I don't want to just stop at the 10th. I want to, we have to talk about 11th place, and it's because Kirkwood has 2 wins. He finished only 4 points behind Colton Herta. Striking difference here is obviously the wins, but expectations are high next year. I think, Tim, for both of these guys, and I think maybe again I can say this because I have a podcast and I've got a microphone. Um, Maybe Kirkwood becomes the F1 guy if he continues to outperform. He finished 11th. Herta finished 10th, but I would tell you, in my mind, Kirkwood outperformed Herta this year.
yeah, I think you're right. When you get 2 wins, I think you're the guy on the top of the podium for the team. You're definitely uh, going to, and from a viewer perspective, you're going to get more coverage. You're going to be the guy. Um, Kirkwood just had some bad instances over the season that cost him, to be further up in the standings here. But I think everybody says Kirkwood's won in every series he's been in. He came to IndyCar now and he's won. I just wonder if you didn't put him in a Foyt car for a year, where this team could be. Like, I think that's
Right.
maybe a strategic mistake at the time, in not putting him directly into an Andretti Autosport car. So I think you're playing catch up with him a little bit, but he seemed to catch right on this year, and maybe did better than most people expected. Right,
Mhm.
and I think that's where your sort of comment comes from. Is Herta did much worse than what people expected, and Kirkwood did the opposite. So from our perspective, it's yeah, Kirkwood had a much better season.
Yeah, much better season. Um, It'll be interesting to see how that progresses. Coming into the season, I wasn't a fan because I felt like some of the things that Andretti just felt to me like I don't know, he was really given his best effort after in some races or in some circumstances. I just felt like he was just mailing it in,
Hmm.
and so I wasn't exactly a fan. I didn't really have a lot of expectations here because I just wasn't really looking at him. But he's turned me around a little bit this year. He's turned me around a little bit this year, and I'm anxious to see what next year looks at. That's it. 1 through 10, 1 through 11, really.
Yeah, very nice.
Timmy, I added all the drivers' points for each of our picks, and guess what? You smoked me on this thing. 4,225 points, which is what yours truly generated this year with his picks, to 4,601. And it's 100%. I had Simon Pagino as 10th, and you had Mr. Felix Rosenquist. So congratulations.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I saw that in the notes, and I was really surprised to see that. You also had Grosjean in there, which was
I did.
in your
Yeah.
top 10.
You did not?
I did not have Grosjean in my top 10.
Yeah. He
So those were the two picks. Everybody but Rosenquist on mine was in the top 10. You had two that were out
Oh,
and
yeah. You had
one.
Ericsson and Rosenquist in your top 10. How sweet
Yeah.
it is. I did not. I had, Grosjean and Pagino,
Yeah.
which,
So
of course, we wish all the best to Simon Pagino as he continues to convalesce and heal from his head injury there after Mid Ohio.
yeah.
You got time for a quick grid walk?
Did we bet on that though? That I'd get the most points? I feel
Dude,
like
you
there's a
still owe me for like so many other bets. Um, so this one doesn't even matter. It's so far down the list.
It was a crushing though. It was a
Yeah, it was. It
complete.
was. That was a drubbing. I got the stuffing knocked out
I
of me
feel
there.
like Palou for a minute, so thank
Yeah,
you for
yeah. There you go. And I'm Joseph Newgarden.
that.
You got time to walk the grid?
Yeah, let's do it.
Red Bull's win streak of 15 races and Max Verstappen's run of 10 in a row came to an end in Singapore as Carlos Sainz in the Scuderia takes win from pole. I did not see it. My bride and my baby girl watched it. I think that they might have been a little overly joyful with Mr. George George's crash at the end there. But nevertheless, I hear it was a good race. I still haven't watched it. So, but good for him. Kind of a bummer though, I think, for Mercedes and Aston, who remain winless, because I think earlier in the season, most people were looking at either Mercedes or Aston Martin as being the likelier teams to get a win
Yeah.
if Red Bull faltered.
Yeah.
And for
So
everybody who thinks the flexible floor and the wings, changing the wings and how they test wings, thinking that's going to have anything to do. Well, we're recording this a little bit early. As of free practice 1 and free practice 2 in Japan, Red Bull's right back on top by a comfortable margin. So
yeah. Dan, if I were you, I wouldn't take your time to go back and watch it. I don't think it was really that exciting of a race, to be honest with you.
Second half of it, I hear, is where it picked up.
Yes, that is true. That is true. So if you want to watch from there, go ahead and do it. Otherwise, I'd say you can pass it.
Right. Honda Racing Development announced a restructuring that will see one global enterprise rather than the U.S. arm and the Japanese arm, which is what we've become accustomed to seeing. You can read more about this just about anywhere, but I would go to racer.com. They've got good stuff about it. As in any restructuring, everyone's optimistic about the coming synergies and the opportunities that, are presented here, particularly competing in Le Mans 24. They did mention their ongoing commitment to IndyCar in the U.S. I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah. Let's hope that holds true.
Yeah, because if you look at how they've done Formula One over the last, let's say, 2 decades, right? They're in, they're out, they're in, they're out, they're in, they're out, but maybe we made a mistake getting out, and right. So I just hope that kind of wishy-washy thing doesn't filter its way into IndyCar.
Yeah, they've been around for a long time though, so yeah. I guess we'll see. But if you're bringing the two arms together, how does that impact it, right?
Right. Speaking of Honda's commitment to IndyCar, Chip Ganassi Racing, as we mentioned earlier, announced that they will have 5 entries in 2024, giving a seat to Kevin Simpson, whose family is behind the Ridgeline Lubricants sponsorship, that all green car, which looks pretty sharp on track. That obviously gives one additional engine to accommodate this expansion for Ganassi. And I'm saying additional because we don't know if Andretti is confirmed to go to 3 cars next year, if they're going to stay with 4. Recent chatter, of course, is that they're going to go to a 3-car team, which, as you mentioned earlier, is the sweet spot, right? And I think a lot of people
we hear
that. Yeah, so we'll stay tuned. Silly season, Ed Carpenter Racing is testing Oliver Askew and Christian Rasmussen as they continue to evaluate drivers for the number 20 after Captain America decided to vacate that and he wasn't going to go back into that car full-time for next year. Askew did drive full-time with Arrow McLaren in its previous guise, as McLaren, I should say, was just kind of starting to come on board with that Sam Schmidt team. He had some concussion concerns. Concussion concerns after a crash at Indianapolis. You could look that up too. Maybe he hid some of the concussion, maybe he didn't, maybe the team didn't treat it the way they should have, and whatever happened there. Nonetheless, he wasn't invited back the following year. Don't know if either of those have anything to do with it, but that's the timeline. He did serve in substitution with Arrow McLaren after Felix Rosenqvist had that ugly crash in Detroit. Do you remember that, where it looked like the throttle stuck, but McLaren said no, it didn't stick, but he went almost through and over the fence because the car just never made that stop. So Askew was in car in substitution there. He drove a few races with RLL prior to that team deciding to commit to Lundgaard. He also drove for Andretti. He being Askew drove for Andretti in Formula E. Can you tell who I'm rooting for in this seat?
I already know. I saw it on Twitter.
Oh yeah. Ollie.
Yep.
So he did claim Rookie of the Year status in Formula E while driving for McLaren.
So your mind's made up.
My mind is made up. I want to see Oliver Askew get another shot at IndyCar. I think he definitely has earned it. I think he got kind of a raw deal there with getting unceremoniously dumped by Arrow McLaren. He was a champ too, big time champ. Indy Next, prior, when it was called Indy Lights. He was strong, very strong. So we'll see what happens there. Christian Rasmussen, of course, is the reigning Indy Next champion, having claimed that mantle for HMD Motorsports. He had 5 wins and 3 poles this past season en route to the championship. So we'll see. No word yet.
Yeah, we'll see.
Either one is good choices. I'm rooting a little bit more for Oliver because I think his experience and I think his maturity, will I think be a nice compliment alongside Rinus VK.
And there you have it.
That's it.
I'm indifferent on either. We'll just see what happens. I can't wait to see where they land and what takes place next season.
Yeah. That's all I got, Tim.
It was a good show. It's good following up on the season for sure. I'm glad I won. I didn't know it was a competition, but I'm glad you added the points up.
Good for you, Tim.
Thanks for clapping. And then,
One hand.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a little more racing this season through the other series. So tune into some of that, and maybe we'll talk about some of that in future podcasts. But
sure will. Every other week, we'll continue to bring you content the best we can. We'll pull something together every other week. We go all year long. The season doesn't stop. So, all right. Well, have a good rest of your day, Tim. It was good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well.
You still haven't been able to find your razor.
That is true. I've not found it, but I did trim it down because it was getting pretty long.
Right.
So I use it a little bit. Yours looks a little more shaped than mine. So we'll see.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Continue to engage with us on social media. We always get great responses on the YouTube, so continue to do that. We do appreciate all that. Look for us on Twitter and Instagram occasionally. I sent some Detroit Grand Prix stuff on Instagram.
Detroit Auto Show stuff too.
Detroit Auto Show. That's what I meant.
Yes.
Sorry.
There was like a Jeep going over some mountain.
Yeah. Go there. It was a dud. We could talk about that in another show. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. See you.
Good night.